Of the roughly 11 Aramaic Enoch manuscripts pulled out of Qumran Cave 4 in the early 1950s, fragments covering visions of angels, a flood, the movements of the sun and the moon, at least one whole section of the book has never turned up in that cave. Not a scrap, not a corner, nothing. That section is called the Parables, chapters 37 through 71. And buried inside it, chapter 60, verses 11 through 22, is a passage most Western readers have never heard of, a list of storehouses. Not metaphorical storehouses. Named chambers, one for hail, one for snow, one for frost, one for mist, one for dew, one for rain, each staffed, each sealed, each opened only on command. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is the only Christian tradition on earth that kept this book in its Bible. Everyone else lost it, or excluded it, long before most of Europe had ever heard the name Enoch. By the 4th century, the councils shaping the Christian canon had left it out for good. It survived in Ge'ez, the ancient language of Ethiopia, copied and recopied in monasteries most Western scholars never set foot in until centuries later. Here's what's strange about chapter 60 specifically. Almost every other section of Enoch has some kind of Aramaic backup, a fragment recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls confirming it existed in something close to this form 2,000 years ago. Chapter 60 has none. The only copies of this exact passage that have ever surfaced anywhere are Ethiopic. One tradition, one language, one unbroken line of transmission, carrying the only known copy of something that reads less like a psalm and more like an inventory. Verse 11 opens with an angel telling Enoch he's about to be shown what's hidden in the heights and under the dry ground and in the depths and at the ends of the heaven. Then the text stops being vague. It names the sea, it names the frost, the hail, the snow, the mist, the dew, the rain. Each gets its own entry. Each gets its own angel. Each gets its own method of storage and release. This isn't a hymn about God's power over weather in the abstract. Read plainly, it's closer to a facilities log. And it's a facilities log that survived exactly once, in exactly one place, inside a tradition the rest of Christianity spent centuries trying to forget. Over the next few minutes, what this text actually says, who's assigned to guard it, and why modern atmospheric science keeps landing in the same territory Enoch mapped 2,000 years ago. If forbidden biblical infrastructure is your thing, hit subscribe. Every week we open something the church tried to close. No Aramaic fragment of chapter 60 exists. That's not a gap in the historical record. That's a conclusion drawn directly from the primary edition of the material. Joseph Millick, working with Matthew Black, published The Books of Enoch, Aramaic Fragments of Qumran. Cave 4 in 1976, cataloging everything Cave 4 actually produced. Chapters 37 through 71 aren't in it. Not a fragment number, not a scrap. If you are looking for a Dead Sea Scroll copy of the Storehouse passage, one does not exist to be found. Millick did not just note the absence, he used it. His argument was that no Aramaic trace at Qumran meant this section was written later than the rest of the book, possibly centuries later, possibly after Christianity had already begun. That claim did not go unanswered. In 2005, a group of scholars known as the Enoch Seminar met specifically to re-examine it, and the resulting volume, Parables of Enoch. A paradigm shift, edited by Gabriele Boccaccini, argued the opposite, that the vocabulary and theology inside the text point to a genuine Jewish origin before the year 70. Neither side has won that argument outright. It is still cited both ways. What does exist, regardless of which side is right, is Ethiopic. One of the manuscripts scholars use to reconstruct this chapter sits in the British Library in London, catalogued as Oriental Manuscript 485, a 16th century Ge'ez codex logged into the official register by the cataloger William Wright in 1877. It isn't the only copy. Scholars also draw on EMML 2080, a 15th century manuscript held in Ethiopia and preserved on microfilm at St. John's University in Minnesota, and on Abadianis 55, another 15th century witness used as a base text by earlier translators. Michael Knibb produced the standard critical edition in 1978, working with Edward Ollendorff at Oxford in a 2-volume study called The Ethiopic Book of Enoch, a new edition in the light of the Aramaic Dead Sea fragments. The title admits its own limitation. Knibb could check most of the book against the newly published Aramaic material. Chapter 60 wasn't one of the sections he could check that way, because there was nothing in Aramaic to check it against. 2 earlier translators handled the same passage differently, and neither had Knibb's advantage either. R.H. Charles, in his 1906 translation, later expanded for Oxford in 1913, rendered the storehouses as chambers. Ephraim Isaac, translating from a different Ethiopic manuscript for James Charlesworth's Old Testament pseudepigrapha in 1983, rendered the same structures as storehouses. Different centuries, different base manuscripts, no shared Aramaic anchor to check either one against, and they still landed on the same facility, described the same way both times. Chapter 60 does not talk about weather like a poem. It talks about weather like a tour guide walking you through a building. Before the list most people know, verses 12 through 14 cover the 4 winds. Each wind gets its own direction. Thunder and lightning show up here too, and they get the same flat treatment as everything else. No storm, no drama. Just 2 more things on the list, right before the part everyone quotes. Start with the sea. Verse 16 says the spirit of the sea is strong. It gets pulled back with a rein, like an animal on a leash. Then it gets let go again. It spreads out over the mountains. Someone is holding that rein. The sea does not just move on its own. Next comes frost. Verse 17 says, the spirit of hoarfrost has its own angel. One thing, one angel. No sharing. Right after that comes hail. Same verse, next line. The spirit of hail also has its own angel, called simply a good angel. Frost and hail sit side by side in the text, but they get 2 separate workers, not one. Then comes snow. Verse 18 says the spirit of snow has left its own chamber because of how strong it is. Something like smoke rises up from it. The text gives that smoke a name, frost. But this is not the same frost from 2 lines earlier. It is a second, different frost, made by snow, kept apart from the first. Next is mist. Verse 19 makes a point of saying mist does not share a chamber with the others. It gets its own room. That room never closes. It works in daylight and in darkness, in winter and in summer, and an angel stays inside that chamber the whole time. Not visiting, staying. Then comes dew. Verse 20 says, Gigiu lives at the far edge of the sky. It is hooked up to the rain chamber next door. Its clouds and the mist's clouds touch each other. One feeds the other. Last comes rain. And this is the part that matters most. Verse 21 does not say, the rain just falls. It says, the angels come. They open the storehouse. They carry the rain out by hand. Someone has to walk over. Someone has to open a door. Nothing here just happens on its own. 6 things, 6 chambers, 6 workers. One angel lives inside her chamber full time. One thing goes missing until it turns into something with a different name. And every single release needs a person to open a door first. Chapter 60 never names one guardian for this system. What it gives instead is a staff list. Hoarfrost gets its own angel. Hail gets its own angel. Mist gets an angel stationed inside its chamber full time. 6 jobs, 6 postings, no single manager named anywhere in the passage. That absence matters more than a name would. Picture it as an org chart instead of a myth. Nobody here is worshipped. Somebody is assigned. Enoch does name specific angels for jobs like this, just in other chapters. A few chapters earlier, in the section called the Book of Watchers, Uriel holds the job of showing Enoch how the sky works. He is not there to be prayed to. He is there to brief Enoch, the way a site supervisor walks a new hire through a facility, pointing out what does what. Uriel keeps that same job later on too, in the section called the Astronomical Book, chapters 72 through 82, where his task is explaining the calendar and the movement of the sun and moon. Same function both times. Report the mechanics. Nothing about the report asks to be worshipped. A few chapters after 60, in chapter 71, the job changes hands. Michael takes Enoch by the arm and shows him what the text calls the storehouses of the stars. Different storehouses, same kind of task. Someone with clearance walks the visitor through, explains what is kept where, and moves on to the next thing on the list. There is a third figure worth noting, and the text places him just after the storehouse list rather than inside it. In verse 24, right after the weather chambers close out, Enoch is with someone the text only calls the Angel of Peace, introduced by that title for the first time. But when this figure finally speaks, it is not about the weather at all. He is commenting on the two monsters described earlier in the same vision, Leviathan and Behemoth. He is standing right next to the storehouse tour and never says a word about it. Whatever runs the weather system in chapter 60, it is not him either. None of this reads like devotion. It reads like clearance levels. Uriel briefs on sky mechanics. Michael briefs on star storage. An unnamed staff runs the daily weather chambers. And the one named figure standing closest to the storehouses never once mentions them. What the text never does is explain what happens if any of this fails. No chamber floods. No angel misses a shift. Whatever failure looks like inside this system, Enoch was never shown it, and neither are we. Modern meteorology never read the Book of Enoch, but it ended up sorting the sky in a similar way. Hail, snow, frost, dew, mist, and rain are not treated as one thing with different names. They are treated as 6 separate processes, each one needing its own temperature, its own altitude, and its own conditions before it can form at all. Hail needs a strong storm that carries ice up and down through a cloud over and over. Snow forms through a different cold process entirely, at a different altitude. Frost does not even need a cloud. It forms straight onto a cold surface from the air around it. Dew forms at ground level with no storm involved at all. Chapter 60 splits these into separate chambers. Modern science splits them into separate mechanisms. Neither one treats falling water as a single simple thing. There is a second parallel worth naming, and this one is not theoretical. For decades, real weather modification programs have tried to trigger the release of moisture that is already sitting in the sky. Cloud seeding in the United States goes back to the 1940s. China has run large-scale rain enhancement research for years. The United Arab Emirates has tested cloud seeding as a way to coax rain out of clouds that would not otherwise release it. These programs work by adding particles that give water vapor something to collect around, which pushes it to fall sooner than it would on its own. That is close, in function, to what chapter 60 describes when it says the angels have to come and open the storehouse before rain moves at all. Both pictures involve something that sits in place until an outside action makes it move. None of this proves the ancient text knew anything about clouds, and that needs to be said clearly. A writer working before the modern era had no instruments, no way to measure temperature at altitude, no way to test what actually causes frost instead of dew. What can be said, more carefully, is narrower than that. Two systems, built almost 2,000 years apart, one religious and one scientific, both landed on the same basic move. Do not treat frozen and falling water as one category. Split it up. Assign each piece its own conditions and its own trigger for release. Whether that overlap means anything beyond coincidence is not something this video is going to settle. Here is what this comes down to. If chapter 60 really is what it claims to be, a record from before the current era, then somebody, thousands of years ago, sat down and organized the sky into 6 separate categories, each with its own storage and its own release, without a single tool that could confirm any of it. That is not a small claim. That is a claim about how carefully some ancient minds were watching the weather, long before anyone standing on the ground had a reason to split hail from frost. If it is not what it claims to be, if it is a later composition dressed in older language, then it is a forgery precise enough that translators a century apart, working from different manuscripts in different countries, all rendered it the same functional way without ever comparing notes. Either answer should bother you a little. And either way, the same fact sits underneath both of them. The only reason we are even having this argument today is because one church in one country refused to let this book disappear, while every council that mattered in Europe decided it was not worth keeping. 1600 years is a long time to lock a text out of the conversation. It is long enough that by the time anyone could go check the claim against real Aramaic material, there was nothing left in that language to check it against. Whatever Chapter 60 actually is, ancient record or later invention, the decision to exclude it was made centuries before anyone alive today could weigh in on it. There is a bigger question hiding underneath this one, and it reaches past Chapter 60 entirely. If a single council's list, drawn up in one sitting, can decide which ancient claims get treated as testimony and which get treated as fantasy for 16 centuries, then reliability was never really about the text itself. It was about who kept a seat at the table long enough to be heard. Enoch did not lose that seat because anyone checked its details and found them wanting. It lost that seat before there was any way to check it at all. That is the part worth sitting with. Not whether angels really run the weather. Whether a text this specific, this consistent across centuries of translation, deserved 1600 years of silence before anyone outside one country was even allowed to argue about it. If forbidden biblical infrastructure is your thing, hit subscribe. Next week, we open a different chamber the church tried to keep shut.